There's a gap opening up right now that most businesses haven't yet caught on to. Right now, most people's experience with AI is still through a chat interface, like with ChatGPT, with Claude, with Gemini, or Copilot. So you ask it a question, it gives you an answer, and you might use it to help you write an email, to summarize a document, analyze a report, generate some content, or even help you think through a problem. And it's very useful for helping you think, write, research, or help you understand something. But it's not actually doing the work for you. You're still the one that's copying the answer, that's pasting it into the next system, or sending the email, or creating the task, updating the CRM, or even following up with the customer. So in a weird way, you end up becoming the assistant to the assistant. And that is the gap. So right now, we're in a state of AI overhang, meaning that the technology is capable of far more than what most people and businesses are using it for. And that gap creates what we call an arbitrage window. There's a short period where understanding and implementing this early on is a real advantage, where you can build leverage before it becomes the obvious thing that everybody is doing. And that is where agentic workflows come in. So in the last 6 months, this has been by far the biggest shift that we've seen in this space. So you may or you may not be familiar with this through tools like Claude Code, Codex, Claudebot, and many, many others. Instead of giving AI a prompt and getting an answer back, you give it a goal, it decides what tools and what context to pull, and can take action and adjust if needed and work towards that outcome for you. So in this video, I want to break down what an agentic workflow actually is, how it's different from the AI that you might be used to using right now, and how it's different to workflow automation or AI workflows, and what it means for how businesses will operate over the next 6 to 12 months. So the big difference between Claude and Claude Code, or ChatGPT and Codex, is where the AI sits and what it can do. So Claude or ChatGPT sits in a normal chat window. It can help you think through the work, whereas Claude Code or Codex can sit inside the working environment. So whether that be through a desktop app or whether it be through a CLI like VS Code, and it can go ahead and execute work across the different systems you give it access or permissions to. So in simple terms, instead of just answering a question, these systems can understand what you want done, figure out the steps involved, use the right tools, and go ahead and execute the work for you. So how do agentic workflows differ from, say, traditional automations? So most businesses may already have automations running, whether that be through Zapier, through N8N, through Make, or other workflow building tools. Traditional automations are usually deterministic, meaning that they are built around a predefined process. Even when you add AI into these steps, the overall flow is still mapped out in advance. So for example, let's say an email comes in, you might then have an AI step that summarizes that email, classifies it, and decides what category it belongs to. But after that, the workflow still follows the path that we built out beforehand. And this is still very useful, and we build these out all the time. But where it differs from agentic workflows is that traditional automation workflows may use AI inside a predefined process, whereas with agentic workflows, it uses AI to decide the process itself. So you give the agent a goal, you give it context, you give it tools, you can give it boundaries, but then it goes ahead and works out what needs to happen next. It chooses the right tools and it goes ahead and takes action autonomously. Another big difference is that agentic workflows can be designed to recover when something goes wrong. So what I mean by this is, with a normal automation, if one step of that entire process fails, the whole automation itself usually stops. So let's say there's an API request fails, or a field is missing, or a tool returns something unexpected, the workflow would just error out, and then someone would need to go in and fix it. Whereas with an agentic workflow, the agent in a lot of cases can read what happened, understand the issue, try another route, and keep working towards the same goal. So to be clear, it's not some magical tool. It's not perfect. And for anything sensitive or high risk, you still need human oversight. But the direction is clear. We're moving from automations that stop when something breaks to workflows that can spot problems, adapt, and then keep going. At a simple level, an agentic workflow has 3 parts. So 3 layers: skills, tools, and orchestration. So think of skills like the playbooks, tools are the systems and the actions, and orchestration is the brain that decides what happens next. So if we start with skills, skills are the instructions for how the work should be done. So you can think of a skill sort of like an SOP or a playbook or an employee manual that's written for the agent. It explains things like what the goal is, what good looks like, what steps to follow, what rules to respect, what information to use, a format that the output should be in. And this is the part that a lot of people miss. You can have the best AI model in the world and it can be connected to every tool in your business. But if the instructions are vague, the output will be inconsistent. It's the exact same as if you were to hire a new employee and you say, go find me some leads. It's not enough. They need to know your ICP, they need context, they need to know what a good lead looks like, what sectors to avoid, what companies that you already work with, what tone you should use, what information you want captured and how you want that structured. And that is what skills provide. So a proper skill might say, here is our ICP, here is how we score leads, here are the companies to avoid, here's the information that we're looking for, here's our existing customers, here is the outreach angle, here's the format that we want this updated into our CRM. And that's the difference between an agent that's producing just generic rubbish outputs and an agent that's doing useful and consistent work. The next layer is tools. Tools are the systems and actions that the agent can use. So think about the systems that you might use in your business, whether that be your CRM, your email, your calendar, any spreadsheets, Slack, project management tool, any other softwares that you use throughout your business. A tool could be search a CRM, it could be send an email, it could be check calendar availability. However, the AI doesn't just magically access everything. You need to give it specific tools that it can work with, and you need to give it specific permissions. So that's another really important point in terms of putting guardrails in place and not having AI run rogue across your business. So that might be a case of it's allowed to read the CRM but not edit it, or it might be able to draft emails but get approval first before sending, or it might be to book meetings but only with internal participants. And that's what makes it controlled and practicable, by giving it rules that it needs to stay within, permissions. Without tools, AI can only advise, whereas with tools, it can go ahead and take action. And then the third layer is orchestration. So orchestration is the brain of the workflow. It reads the goal, it understands the context, it looks at the available tools, it decides what should happen next. So it's sort of like a project manager that's sitting inside the business. It doesn't just respond once and stop. It runs in a loop. So whether that be planning, acting, checking, replanning, it breaks a bigger goal into smaller steps. So it chooses the right tools, it checks whether the action worked, it then decides what to do next. So the 3 layers are simple. Skills tell the agent how the work should be done, tools let the agent take action, and orchestration decides what happens next. And that's the core structure, high level, of an agentic workflow. So let's take an example. Let's look at partnerships, which is actually something that we're exploring internally. So that's why it comes to mind. But most businesses would benefit from having a better partnership process. So whether that be finding businesses that already have access to your ideal customers and can refer work to you. Traditionally, you might hire someone into a partnership role, and that can absolutely make sense. A good partnership person brings relationships, judgment, builds trust with those partners. But a lot of the work around the actual partnership role can be quite repetitive. Finding potential partners, researching their business, checking if they fit your criteria, writing first draft outreach, following up, updating the CRM. And that is where an agentic workflow can help change that role. So you give the agent an objective, find good fit referral partners, research them properly, run the outreach, manage replies, go ahead and book meetings. You give it the tools, so access to your CRM, be able to read your emails, access to your calendar for availability and booking meetings, web research, partner databases, the ability to log activity against a contact's record. Then you give it skills, so how to identify a good partner, how to research their business, how to understand their customer base, how to write outreach that doesn't sound like a template, how to classify replies, how to follow up without being annoying. Then the workflow just runs itself. It finds the prospects, it researches them, it drafts and sends outreach, it follows up, it tracks replies, updates the CRM, books the meeting. You get the gist. And the human steps in where they bring the most value. Having the real conversations, building the relationships, discussing commercial terms, deciding the strategic angle. The moments that need judgment and need trust. That's where the partner can leverage most of their time. So it's not about replacing the partnerships person. It's about removing the admin and giving them more leverage to focus on higher value work. Instead of spending the week buried in research, chasing up CRM updates, they can spend their time on conversations that actually move the business forward. And this is where the strategic shift really lands. The old version of leverage was mostly vertical. So you hired one person into one role and that person owned that stream of work. And that still matters. Great people are still the biggest advantage to any business. But an agentic workflow creates a different kind of leverage. They can support, say, 60, 70, 80% of the repetitive work across a lot of different roles. So horizontal leverage. So not all of one person's role, but parts of many people's role. And that might mean helping sales with follow-ups. That might mean helping operations with updates, helping customer service with triage, helping finance with document checks, helping recruitment with screening. The result is not a business with no people. It's a business where people are less buried in low-value work. The team can spend more time on judgment, relationships, creativity, problem solving, sales conversations, client experience, and that's the real shift. So this shift has been made possible through tools like Claude Code, like Codex, but the mistake that most businesses make is starting with the tool. They ask, should we use Claude Code? Should we use Codex? While yes, you absolutely should, that's the wrong starting point. Instead, start with the work. So look at the business and ask what's repetitive, what involves reading, deciding, chasing, updating, following up, what creates admin overload, what slows the team down, what doesn't really need deep human judgment every time. That's where your first agentic workflows should go. Because the real value is not in having AI for the sake of it. The value is in building systems that actually move work forward. So that's the shift from using AI to help you think or write your emails to building agentic workflows that understand your business and help you operate it. So if you're looking to implement agentic workflows into your business, I put together a free document below that breaks down exactly how they work in detail, the different layers involved, and the tools that you can use to get this in place. So you can go ahead and grab it. I've included the link below. It's absolutely free.